Hey there, this is First Line to Last Mile with Kim, and I'm Kim. This is also the second episode where we are working on a math app. If you haven't seen the first episode, I highly recommend that you watch that one first, or at least read the episode notes. So in the first episode, we built a math app for elementary school kids. We tried a couple of versions of the prompt, and then this time around, we're gonna iterate on top of the last version that we made, which has some server-side database persistence and introduced some level game mechanics into the math app. And so now we're gonna take a look at what we have, then iterate from that. Most notably, we're noting for fourth level, when we go in and start a level, that they are multiple choice. But I think it would be reasonable for second grade through fifth grade to do keyboard input instead of doing multiple choice. So let's ask Copilot to make that change. Can you update the levels so second grade through fifth have to use keyboard input instead? Okay, it wrapped up. So let's take a look at what we got. We see immediately the page reloaded with an input field. Let's just double check that the first grade still uses multiple choice. It does, and let's just try a couple of inputs. Next problem, let's get this one wrong. Oh, so we have an issue with submitting potentially wrong answers. We're gonna have to come back and debug that. And now let's actually test the keyboard input. There's an easy gimme here, which is definitely the hint text or the placeholder text is too big, so maybe we should just get rid of it. So I'll just tell Copilot that the placeholder text is too large. Actually, I'll just say that, and then we'll see what Copilot comes up with. Okay. I think that's better. The question mark is a little small, but in the grand scheme of things, I think it's fine. We could choose whether to do something else or not, and that would be a relatively easy change. Something we haven't talked about yet is that it did generate a lot of code, right? But we haven't really looked at it, and that is really crucial when you let generative AI generate this amount of source code. You absolutely have to understand what's in it, right? Because ultimately you have to take ownership of the code, even if you keep collaborating with Copilot on doing additional changes. Otherwise, it will definitely run away from you when it gets into trouble and it struggles to debug what the issue is. And if you can't step in, either as a thought partner or even take over, then you're stuck, right? So that is definitely crucial. In large picture, it definitely understood how to generate and do server-side and client-side code the remix way. With remix routes, every route page is required to have a default function that is a React component, which is server-side rendered and then automatically iterated. And then you can provide an optional loader function that is called when the page is loading. It must return a JSON serializable data structure. In this case here, it is fetching the level, the user, and the progress we have in the level. And then that data is available through a hook called useLoaderData. And we see here that it's the key structure in the level, the user, and the progress. And that's really nice because now all of that is co-located in the same source file. So you can clearly see the shape of the data that we're providing for the component and how it's being used here. And then as your React component grows in size, you can begin and split out the part here into smaller React components, but you're still gonna have how the data and the React component, they are glued together. That all reads clearly here, right? And the same thing, if the loader data grows out of hand in terms of length, you can split that out into helper functions, into other modules. But at the bottom, you will still have this return function where you can clearly see this is the shape of the data that I'm loading. And then to handle the other way around, when we have a form submission against a path, you can provide a optional action function for grabbing that form data and then typically do persistence or triggering some sort of server-side action based on the data that's coming. And that also lives side by side with the code that actually triggers and handles the form submission on the browser side. And then Remix uses code splitting to make sure that the action and the loader code only exists on the server side of the web application server, and the browser side doesn't have that code at all. So it only bundles the React component plus anything that the React component references, and Remix will let you know if you're trying to call things that are supposed to be server-side only, so that you can fix that. So it means that you don't have to worry about your server-side code being exposed in the code that's loaded on the browser side. I like this paradigm. I think it's pretty easy to work with, and it makes, especially for developer experience, I think it makes it easy to rapidly build out client-server interaction you have between React code that's running in the browser and then the data you're loading and the data you're persisting on the server side. And then you can have other files that are not route files. There's a naming convention to indicate if something is strictly client-side, strictly server-side. And you can also have mixed mode, like for example, you might have a file with the type definitions that are used both server-side and client-side, and in that case, without putting client or server in the name, you can import it in both cases. And again, Remix will complain if you're trying to call things browser-side that, for example, depends on things that are only available server-side in the Node.js context versus the browser context. So with that aside, let's continue iterating on this app. We did note that there was an issue with the wrong answers, right? So let's just confirm that's the case also with the text input. So now we're going to say 50, and that actually worked. Let's go back to the multiple choice and see, maybe it's just an issue with multiple choice. So 4 minus 3 is 1. Okay, and so we're going to go to the next problem, and now we're going to give a wrong answer, and that also works. Let's see what happens here. Now we're giving a wrong answer to 20 to 10 plus 10, and that works. So yeah, it seems like it's just specifically this very first question. If I give the right answer, it works. Let's go back, start over. If I give the wrong answer, this time 15. Oh, so it's actually specifically for answering 0. Maybe there's something funny that's happening when I give 0. Okay, so there's an interesting edge case, but it may be something that comes from the seed data instead of the code, or maybe it's specifically that it's 0. Let's try some more wrong ones and see if it's 0 that's the problem. Okay, so I think that's something that definitely goes on the to-do list, but there's more high-level stuff that I want to work on first. So I want to get back to the level mechanics, because right now a level is all addition or all subtraction or all multiplication and so on. So I want to change that so that each level has a mix of problems. Can we make it so each level has a mix of math operations for grades for second through, I think for first. Kindergarten is only addition, I think. First through 5th grade. Okay, we'll see what Copilot comes up with. Okay, Copilot's wrapping up a summary of the changes that it did. We asked it to mix the operations for each level, and it claims that it did it, and it was exclusively a update to the seed file. It reran the seed file, and so we'll see what we get out of that. I'm not sure if we need to restart the server or whether it's going to work out of the box. It looks like it is working out of the box because we lost the 2 profiles that we created previously while we were testing the app. So let's create a new profile. Let's pick the penguin, and let's have Zoe is in kindergarten. Oh, actually, let's check the mixed. So Zoe is in 2nd grade. And now It's saying mixed math. Okay, that's fine. It's a little verbose, but we can live with that. So 10 minus 5 is 5. And we're going to go to the next. And then we're going to get it wrong here. So we're going to stick with actual, let's say 10. And then we're clearly getting a mix of addition and subtraction here. So that's good. Let's do 5th grade and see if we get something else. So we have here, we have Javier, who is in 5th grade, and let's see what we get from mixed math. 30 problems. Let's do 5, and let's see if we get addition. Let's see if we can do this one. That is, there's no carry, so that's an 8, and that's a 2. And subtraction. Okay, so it looks like the seed data, it may be that it's only doing addition and subtraction. Yeah. Okay, let's see if the schema, in the schema we specified it generated addition and subtraction, and also, or at least it indicated the intention to also support multiplication and division. I think that's okay for now, because it looks like the way that the problems are defined, it's basically just doing straight up matching on the expected answer. So it all comes down to how the problems are generated. So if we generate multiplication and division, then the level pace as it is right now will still work. It would be a trivial change to update the seed data generator to also generate multiplication and division problems. Something else I was thinking, which I've seen in especially for kindergarten and 1st grade, is visual guides when they get an answer wrong. And maybe even for kindergarten and 1st grade, maybe even showing the problem. So let's do that first. So what I want is, if you're doing math and you're being asked to add 5 to 10, then it's going to show a row of 5 circles and another row of 10 circles, right? So that the child can count along with them. And then we just have to decide what is the cutoff for showing the visual aid. Maybe we can make it adaptive. If the child is struggling to pass a level, maybe we show the hint, and maybe we have a game mechanic where if they don't use the hint or ask for the hint, maybe they get a star or something like that. So I think you always have lots of interesting product decisions to make when you're building things like this. But let's ask Copilot to show visual hints for kindergarten. Can you show visual hints for kindergarten? Okay, it wrapped up the changes. It was isolated to the level pace as it should be, and we can see that it now added some helper routines for rendering visual hints. It understood, based on a somewhat abstract prompt, that I meant visual hint specifically for the math problem, and it came up with more detailed requirements again for how it actually wanted to do that, and then implemented it. And then it restarted the development server and got confused about the port number, but that's easy to fix. We're now running on 5173. Here we are. And so let's add a kindergarten profile. And let's make this Jane kindergarten. And let's see, start level. Let's count together. 3 blue circles and 5 green circles. How many do you see? Count all of them above, and then we're gonna do 8. So that is great. Next problem, and then we're gonna get it wrong. Not quite, and so it's 3. Okay, so I like that. There may be a little bit of tweaking we need to do to keep everything on the screen at the same time when you're on a tablet. So now I want to introduce this. So this is definitely going to complicate things. I want to make this If you fail when you are in, let's say, first and second grade, if you fail, then I wanted to give you a second chance and show this visual aid before we count that as a failure. So let's keep these changes. That's a fairly significant update to the logic of the level app. And so we're also gradually building more and more complexity, right? We went from having everything was multiple choice only. Now we have conditionally multiple choice or text input. And then on top of that, we now have also conditionally showing visual hints only for kindergarten. And now we're asking for visual hints to be even more complicated for first and second grade. If they give a wrong answer, then we're going to show the hint and let them try again. So we'll see what comes out of that. Okay, it's wrapping up the changes and giving a summary of what it did. So it recognized that it had to modify the visual hint that it already implemented just before from the previous prompt, and then it introduced additional state and logic for whether it's a second attempt, and then I'm guessing there must be logic here for when a answer is submitted that is wrong, then and only if it's first or second grade, then we show the hint and we allow them to try again. Okay, so let's see what we have. We have Jane. Sorry, we need a first or second grade. So let's go Jack. And Jack is first grade. Okay, gonna start the level. And so Jack is gonna get this. Oh, we're back to this issue with 0. It's very peculiar. Okay, Jack is gonna get this wrong. So now we see the hint and take away how many are left, and then okay, that's a little on the nose, but okay. Oh, it oh, try again. I see. Okay. That was actually a little confusing. So there's something that's out of sync here, right? It's saying we're showing what is 2 plus 2, and the hint is showing 2 plus 2. We selected 4, but somehow it thinks that the answer that was given was 1. So we failed the problem. There's some weirdness with the state management here, right? It immediately went to not quite, the answer is 1. So now we have the choice. Do we go in and try to fix this ourselves, or do we try to get Copilot to actually fix this issue? So this state is not being reset. So let's find out when it says not quite. That comes from action data. So it looks like we're not clearing action data or clearing this state when we do try again. So it may be that we probably have to do a use effect on the action data so we can manage that in the state, because the action data comes from a hook that returns data when we do a form submission. Let me show here, action data. So we don't manage the life cycle of this, which means that when we submit an answer, we get action data back that indicates that the answer was wrong. That state stays the same even though we click on try again. So the UI incorrectly indicates that we have a wrong answer. And so a couple of things here actually. When try again is enabled for first and second grade, then we shouldn't display what the correct answer is. We should instead only show the hint. So that's one thing. And then maybe that solves the problem all by itself, because we probably need a little bit more nuance here. Okay, so I'm gonna make this, instead of a ternary, we're gonna make it a Boolean like that. Yes, I know. Oh, okay. And then, okay. And then this one is instead gonna depend on whether we are and not show hint, show visual hint. Let's see if that is in itself is enough. Here you can see these buttons are enabled, right? And so if I do this correctly, we get the next problem. If I do it wrong, then we get the hint. So at this point, we need to look at when it's showing the buttons versus when it is showing the expected values. And so let's find that. Okay, so this state is getting more and more complicated, right? And not show visual hint. So that got us most of the way there. Okay, so now it remembers that we answered 12 and that was not correct. I kind of actually like that, but it's still not allowing us to select. And that is probably because of the answer. So let's see how the answer state is being managed. So try again, handle try again. Did I click try again? No, try again is not being shown. So we are in a state now where we're showing try again with help. These buttons are ostensibly enabled, but they don't actually accept input. And so we're probably getting closer and closer to a place where we do need to overhaul how the state is being managed here. So let's see if we can get some heavy lifting from Copilot, or whether we have to do much more heavy-handed instructions on the state management. Okay, Copilot is wrapping up, and I gave fairly specific instructions about the complexity of the state management that was causing headaches, especially for me, to try to grok in the moment what is going on. And Copilot picked up on that, and then it went to town trying to refactor the state. And so what we now have is a high-level state that is the problem state: unanswered, first wrong, answered, and it defaults to unanswered. So that, at a glance, that looks great. It has a showing second chance indicator, and then it moved the logic whether it should show visual hint into a helper function, which we can, if we want to, move to a library function that we can then do some unit testing around, and then lots of other updates. So let's just see if it's actually working. So we have Jack here again. We come in to this problem. Let's submit answer. Not quite. So now, unfortunately, it's not working, right? It's immediately just saying, okay, that was wrong. Let's just see. Jane always gets the hint. Let's see if it's correct. Next problem. Oh, yeah, so now we're stuck again. When I advance to the next problem, then it immediately, now unfortunately, indicates that it was correct. Okay, it wrapped up the changes. It recognized there was a edge case, maybe, with the kindergarten. So let's keep it and see whether that actually works. So we have kindergarten again here, and we're gonna make the right answer. Go to the next problem. And unfortunately, the problem was actually not fixed. Now we're going down the road of trying different ways to get Copilot to fix the bug that it introduced, because up until now it's been all Copilot. In fact, the few code changes I did, it undid when it was attempting to fix this. So we now are faced with a universal dilemma. Do you know when you're beginning to hit rapidly diminishing returns on trying the same approach, or should you actually step in and go like, let me understand all of this fully, or at least so well that I can actually take charge here and either do some of the crucial edits myself, or at least come back with much more detailed instructions for Copilot for how to fix this. In this case now I'm just gonna yell at it and say, hey, it's still not working. Okay, Copilot is wrapping up. So there's definitely a pattern here where we point out an issue we want to change to Copilot. We've now seen several times some incorrect confidence in that it fixed the issue. Here, just like the previous attempt, it's claiming victory and said, I found the issue and I fixed it. But it definitely hasn't, we haven't seen anything that actually backs up it did something to truly verify that it was solved or not solved. So again, let's try this again. 3 plus 5. Let's do 6. Not quite. Oh, this is kindergarten. So we have the hint. Oh, okay. So now it is actually allowing us to proceed to the next question. So let's give the correct answer. Yay! So now it is actually working for kindergarten. Let's go back to first grade Jack, and let's see for the most complicated case where if you do get it wrong, you get the hint. Now it is actually displaying the hint and it's letting me try again. So finally we had to browbeat Copilot to comprehend the full extent of the issue or identify all of the places that needed to be fixed. There's a fair amount of complexity here in the state still, where we're mixing React state, use state hooks, with the other kind of state that we have coming from when we're loading the page and then when we're doing form submissions, and those are different cycles of data updates. And so I think it's no wonder that it gets confused, and it's easy to get this wrong, understanding the full life cycle of the data here that is happening when you have a remix form submission in the mix. And then we had to grapple with, when do you pay the mental tax of actually fully understanding everything of the code so that you can either step in and do the fix yourself or come back with much more detailed instructions for Copilot to actually fix it for you. But I think we're at a good point to wrap up this episode, where we basically just iterated on the math app that we generated in the first episode, and we worked through some scenarios of trying to understand what's happening, and there were definitely bugs that were introduced by the code that Copilot generated, and then we worked through debugging and ultimately fixing those issues. I'm considering making a third episode where we will ask Copilot to generate unit tests for all of this, and then we should probably think about other things like profile management, parental controls, and also the ability to do maintenance, update the problems other than rerunning the seed data, because that also nukes the database. And so with that, thank you so much for following along and watching, and let me know if you have any feedback or any suggestions for future episodes as well. And with that, bye.